But I just wanted to introduce myself first. My name is James Hughes, and I would like to welcome you to the HIVE Solving Content Management Issues presentation. And ATG is a platinum level Autodesk software provider. A platinum partner is someone who has the best customer service, the best technical support, and the best customer retention across the authorized resellers. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a licensed architect in the state of Arkansas, and I have about 13, 14 years of architectural experience. And for the past 4 years, actually now 4.5 years, I've been an AEC industry specialist with ATG. So my full-time job is helping architects, interior designers, landscape architects, engineers, and contractors with Autodesk software training, as well as a number of other technical services and support. And whenever I teach a Revit fundamentals course, I spend a good bit of time discussing best practices for content procurement and creation. And so I've also gained a lot of practical experience with assisting firms to take control of their content libraries using different strategies. And so I hope that you enjoy learning about the capabilities of Hive as a content management solution. All right, so let's talk about what our agenda is for this webinar. We're going to try to understand the power of Hive as a complete content management solution. So it's not just a piece of something that you can use. And we're going to cover where do families come from, which is a piece of Revit training content that I've named because everybody wonders where should I go and how should I, after I go somewhere, how should I keep track of the families that we should be using. So we'll start off with that. Then we'll introduce Hive. And we'll take a look at general navigation throughout Hive and kind of show you after that how we can utilize that from within the Revit project environment. I've got some project examples that we can walk through, so just kind of a typical scenario. If I'm in Revit, how can I get some content or even not within Revit? And we probably, with the general administration, I don't think we're going to have time to be able to step you through visually what that looks like, but I do want to make sure I hit some points on the end of that so that you get a sense of what it is like to administrate a Hive library. I'm checking over in the chat and nobody's saying that they have trouble hearing me, so let's just keep going from here. All right, so where do families come from? Had fun naming that one. Uh, every time I did training, when we got to the part where you place content, people always asked and then sort of perked up to hear the answer about where they should be going. So we're going to take a few minutes going through best practices for Revit content procurement. Now, all of this changes if you're utilizing Hive, but I want to show you what people have been taught and what they're having to sort of deal with. Not like you guys don't know if you're not already dealing with this. But this is another way. When we talk about best practices, that's saying what's everyone else doing, so that I don't have to make everything from scratch myself or go out and find things that are already made and wonder if it's the correct content. If you were making and creating content within Revit, I'm sure you're aware of this, unless you're kind of removed from studio work. It can be fully 1/3 of your documentation efforts to be able to create that content within Revit. So if you were able to really change the efficiency on this side of making sure that your families are easy to find and grab and utilize, then you've got the ability for major efficiency gains. So I've split this graphic in half. You can only see the top four places that I'm kind of telling you the order of operations here, but it is just that. It's an order of operations. You start at the top, and if the content's not available in that top shelf, do you go to the second shelf underneath that? And so we've got 8 places that I send people to be able to go procure content. Um, so on the right side, you can see the pros and cons listed for that. We're just going to quickly step through these. Obviously, you want your very first stop to be your Revit template file, and a lot of companies slave over this thing and spend tens, close to 100 hours in getting their template files exactly where they want them to be, and then they realize, oh wait, this is a living document. You're since I did the first one, you're telling me I have to keep this thing up. And so it does require a constant investment in time. Some people put too much stuff in their template files. Some people put all of their families in a Revit template, and that's a mistake. And then I also see people that streamline their template, and they have almost nothing or really nothing in that. And there's different trains of thoughts. If you're leveraging a Hive type solution, you could go real streamline on your template file. The guideline that I give people, you can see it in quotes there, is that you should put all the families that you almost certainly will use in that Revit template file. If you don't find it in your Revit template file because you're not almost certainly going to use it, then you would check your curated network folder. That's entirely different from a Revit City downloads folder. This implies that someone is spending the effort and spending the time to actually aggregate families, to go out and find them and procure them, to be able to modify and change them, to test them out, to flex them, and to basically put their stamp on it. You know, a lot of times this is one person's job. Sometimes if it's a large firm, it may be a few different people and they have trouble communicating that sort of passion project workload. But this should be somebody's job to be able to curate content. And so then you can see I've got a point on there. It's kind of stealing my thunder about consider content management solution like CTC's Hive. So someone has tested these families. Now, in an ideal world, all of the content that you procure could matriculate all the way up to the top here. No firm is there. You know, no firm has actually done all of the work so that they no longer have to go outside of the office or anywhere else to reach out and grab exactly what they need, but it is possible. So the third step down, and a lot of people are surprised to see out of the box Revit content this high in the list. The reason that it's this high in the list is that it's safe to use. Autodesk is not in the business of assuming liability for messing up your project, but it is generic. And it is a low level of development. So typically it's going to be around the 200 mark for LOD. So if you need something that's more detailed than that, you're out of luck with out of the box Revit content. Next below that is previous project. In an AutoCAD workflow, previous project is actually higher up in that list. You would very typically, in fact, you might even gut a project to start from it. In Revit, you don't do that. You start a project from a template file. And if you have to go look for a previous project to find content, oftentimes that can take a while. You know, if Sean Zerbis is here in the audience, if I needed something from a project that Sean had done, and I knew that he worked on a school, you know, a couple of months ago, then I would look around. He's not in the office. Maybe he's doing a site visit or something. And I'd ask when he's coming back. And they'd say, you know, 2 p.m. And so I'd wait a few hours. And then I'd say, hey, Sean, what school project was that where you had an overhead coiling door? And he would think, wow, I think it's either in this school or this school. And he would, you know, give me the project number. Then I would have to go search inside of it. I'm looking for an overhead coiling door. I don't know if it is in the loading dock area. I don't know if it's in the cafeteria or in some kind of a food service area in the gymnasium, but I look around, finally find it. And if it's been hours since I initially needed it, I should ask myself the question, if this overhead coiling door is so special, why didn't Sean do the work to push it up from a previous project to get it up into a curated network folder? Why did I have to go out and find this and waste time? So a previous project, it can be very simple. You can just open that project side by side with yours and copy and paste into it. But the inefficiency is going to search for it and then not really knowing if it's good content to use. So let me jump to the next slide. That's the top 4 places that people are going in order for content. Next up is the manufacturer. Some people get upset, you know, this is kind of low in the list, particularly interior designers and mechanical engineers argue that this should be higher in the list. But you can see over on the sides, you know, the cons for this is that they tend to be over constrained. If you try to load in content and it won't perform what you need it to do, you could make the argument that the manufacturer is keeping you from doing something that their product doesn't do. But oftentimes families are just simply over constrained and they're unable to complete functions that are certainly normal. I've run into that with storefront systems. I downloaded, I'll pick on Conair. I downloaded a Conair Trifab 400 system and I couldn't get it to turn a corner like it should. And so if it's over constrained, I'm going to have, you know, if I try to edit that family, good luck, right? I mean, if you ever try to edit a manufacturer's content, instead of it having 12 or 15 instance parameters on the side in Revit, it'll have 50 and they'll be grayed out and they'll be running through formulas and it's like a Gordian knot to try to figure out how to make it do what you want. But if you were just simply using manufacturer's content to place, which a lot of interior designers are doing, they're just grabbing a steel case, whatever, and putting it in their project. They're not trying to, you know, make it custom. And mechanical engineer may just be grabbing an outside air handling unit. They're not going to stretch or modify geometry on it. They just want to place it in there. If that's true, you could bump that up, 2 slots, I'd say, if you want to consider manufacturer slightly higher. It's worth noting that after we left that first slide, now we are outside the office. Once we're knocking down manufacturers' doors trying to get content, we need to, as the old boxing announcers say, protect yourself at all times. And so now, after the manufacturer, we're going out to BIM object. That I put it above Revit City because it is a curated site that has manufacturers' content primarily within it. It's got a lot of content. It's got, well, according to them, they've got 366,000 plus parametric BIM objects. But the thing you need to note about BIM object is that when you download it, it generates a qualified sales lead to the manufacturer. So I'm not saying Conair would do this since I picked on them earlier in that example, but if I click on their TriFab 400 system through BIM object, they're probably going to get an email that says, hey, user J Hughes and here's his email address, downloaded your system and is interested in it. And maybe a couple of minutes later, so that doesn't freak me out, maybe the next day, that rep is probably going to give me a call and say, hey, I see you're interested in the TriFab 400 system. I looked you up and saw that you guys have been doing this school and you previously specified around such and such. I'd love to, they're going to do their thing, right? And I've got to field a phone call sometimes if it generates a lead for that content. And really, I just wanted to hurry up and get things done. Next one down is Revit City. I'm not mad at Revit City. Corporately, it has saved architects tens of thousands of hours not creating content. But here, you're not just out in the wild finding stuff, you are in the tall grass. And so you really better protect yourself at all times. Now, when we talk about broken families, typically it's not created by someone with malicious intent. In fact, it may be created by someone who really knows what they're doing inside the Revit family editor, but they created content with a specific purpose in mind. And as soon as you start stretching it or using it in a way that they didn't intend, then you can break it. And when it breaks, it can cause corruption inside of your projects, and off you go. I'm sure none of y'all have ever had a corrupt project before, but it's terrible to deal with. And oftentimes people leave Revit City content inside of their project, even when they're not intending to use it. So if you've ever seen bloated projects and you've got people that love to go to Revit City, it can be a real problem for you to keep up good modeling hygiene. And so they've also got a misleading rating system. I've encountered this too. If I get real proud of some, terrible family that I build and I upload it and someone I'll pick on Sean again. He downloads some, I don't know, bookcase that I create. He downloads it and gives it 5 stars because it's exactly the 6 foot tall, 4 foot wide bookcase he was looking for. But then someone else tries to download it to maybe use it as a children's bookcase. And then they shrink it down to 2.5 feet tall. And now there's shelves floating up in space or it's otherwise broken. They would rate it poorly. But if a couple of people bother to rate it with 5 stars, and then people see a 5-star rating and then 100 people have downloaded it and it only did what one person wanted it to, well, now it's a 5-star piece of content with 100 downloads and everybody thinks that it's righteous when maybe it's not really so good for consumption. So that's what I mean by the rating system. Take it with a huge grain of salt. Last case would be to make it from scratch. It's actually pretty infrequent that you would need to start, and it's really not from scratch. You're beginning from a Revit family template or an RFT file, which has baked in Revit system parameters within it. But normally it's going to be faster if you're really not finding content that you need to grab something from out of the box Revit content, which is safe, and then add or subtract from that so that you've got a better starting point. And that, boys and girls, is where families come from. If you have any more questions, ask your mother or ask Sean, I guess. So this kind of takes us through our 8 places. If you have Hive, though, it does significantly change this workflow. We'll get into that in just a minute here. So what is Hive? So Hive is an industry-leading content navigation system that's specifically developed for the AEC, that's us, the AEC industry. It allows firms to organize, manage, set permissions, and ensure that the latest content is kept up to date and it's available for all project participants, even when working remotely. Users can quickly find Revit, AutoCAD, PDF, images like JPEGs and other file types quickly using libraries, tags, favorites, and file metadata. So as opposed to just simply naming a file and using a Windows folder structure. So first, let's identify one pain point that Hive addresses. It's often an inconvenience when you need to be at your desk in front of your computer to execute on basic user management tasks. And sometimes you're out of the office or standing at the user's desk and need to grant access to a tool set or a portion of a tool set quickly. And for that, you've got account management. And the account management portal allows company administrators to generate and regulate access to Hive suite of tools. And it doesn't require Windows Desktop with Hive running. Now, it used to, but the portal is kind of been an evolution of the Hive offering. User administration can be done from any web-enabled device, allowing company admins ease of access to important tasks from anywhere. Some of the key features are going to include group management, so that you can save time and not individually have to manage individual users or grant individual users access. But you can get down to the user level management and add them individually. And you can do that through the web interface. It's also got Active Directory Synchronizer. So instead of requiring individual management, Hive includes a utility that can be installed that allows users and groups to be automatically synchronized with an Active Directory. So that can save time with management for that if you guys have already set up your Active Directory for permissions. So let's identify another pain point that Hive addresses. Users can easily get lost or waste time in company standard folder navigation. I know I have. I've been looking for content. I've been trying to set it up. And sometimes people set up a file path or a folder structure in a way that makes sense to only them. Or then if it makes sense to them and they've got this set of abbreviations in a certain order, they've got to make it make sense to everybody else and make them all look the same way. So folder structure, and even if everybody is familiar with that convention and they're happy with that, you can't put all of the information that you need in the name of the file or in the folder pathing for the file. And sometimes you need content to be in multiple folders. It may apply to several different categories. The file names can't always distinguish which content is appropriate for use in your projects. And then also maintaining and updating and improving those content libraries across multiple departments or locations, that can be tedious for BIM management. That can be a full-time job. So we've also got content browsing. Users can leverage Hive to quickly search and find the exact content that they require for use in their projects. So when users can find what they need quickly and efficiently, they can be significantly more productive. We talked earlier about how, if a third of your project is this sort of finding and placing and modifying of files, any efficiency you can do in that is going to make a big swing at saving money in a project. So design models don't grow in file size unnecessarily from too much loaded content, which means that the project will also run more smoothly and it can be more easily navigated. Some other key features will include design application specialization. So Hive knows how to handle the needs of specialized design applications like Revit. And that means that project-specific views or custom data and special application commands can be leveraged from a single source. You can access Hive from directly within Revit as an add-in or in its toolbar. You can also search and filter, and I'll show you guys that in a little bit. But you've got the ability to do a simple word search and then filter that down either automatically or manually through different categories. You can set up different tags, and you can allow other users to use different tags. A great example of a tag might be fluorescent lights. I call them fluorescents, but I've heard people call them troffer lights. I've heard, oh man, maybe I picked a bad one because I can only think of two or three, but there may be three or four different ways of referring to content. And if I only search for fluorescent and the person that wrote the file, maybe they transposed the U and the O, or they didn't include the term troffer. And so I just spend a long time searching for it. Being able to add a tag is a very valuable feature so that if the content's already in the library, it's just hard for me to find. I can request a tag that allows me to find it more easily. And you can also search the metadata. I mean, you can actually look at parameter values within content and surface that and make that a searchable thing. And then after you've done searches, if you're kind of repeating some of the same searches, you can save those so that you can return to them quickly and often to kind of keep saving even more time. You've got access to content details. I'll show you a preview pane for that a little bit later. And here's one of the coolest things about Hive is that you can just drag and drop stuff in. I mean, as soon as you find it, just like you place a view on a sheet, you just drag it on, and there it is. And we'll take a look at that again whenever we look at it here on screen in just a bit. So if we're revising those 8 steps of where you get content or where do families come from, what's the new best practice? If you're utilizing Hive, then it's very simple. You would first go to your template file, and your almost certain to be used content would be loaded in there. All of your company annotations that you might have standardized around can be loaded in that. Now you could streamline it to where there's almost nothing in there and put everything in Hive and then just make it one step. But I would argue that if you leave things in a template file, just being able to grab them from your, what do you call it, the type selector is going to be your fastest way to be able to navigate to that certain to be used content. And then what we've done is taken trays 2 through 8 and simplified it to where it's all in Hive. So we're no longer empowering users to run out to Revit City. You know, they might think, well, it's either in the template file or I get it from Revit City because I'm not the guy who knows how to make content. So that's the only 2 stops in that 8 tray system I'm familiar with. This empowers them to go to Hive, and then they're searching through a database. If you're, you know, the BIM coordinator or the BIM administrator, you have curated this thing, and you no longer want people going outside of this ecosphere to be able to get things. Now, if what they need is not in Hive, which is going to happen, there's no way for you to predict everything people need. They've got the ability to request a family from within Hive and ask a team to, you know, kind of go out and get it. And it'll send an email to those admins to do that. If they have already created content and maybe they're part of a, you know, BIM curation team, they've got the ability to request to be able to add that to a library and say, I've already got this, and let's go ahead and make it part of the library. Or I finished this project, we did our required postmortem, and I've identified these 6 families, and they belong in these 2 different libraries. And so they've got the ability to, you can kind of democratize that act of keeping up the curation of this, kind of put it on the project managers to look through the families that were heroes for them to be able to add that to the content library, the Hive library. All right, so we're looking at a static screenshot of a Hive interface from my good buddy Matt Lynn's Hive account here. He is logged in as an admin, so you're actually seeing extra content on that left-hand side that admins have access to. So before we get started, it's important to note that Hive is intended to be used by everyone in the firm, not just the Revit users. So you don't just count up your Revit seats and say, well, that's how many Hive users we need to set up. It can be just as valuable for the office manager or a receptionist or your spec writer or whatever the position is as it is for the BIM manager. So this image shows the interface when the Hive application is opened directly, meaning we didn't open up Revit first, which it's also an add-in inside of Revit. But if you just double click on your desktop, you would actually open up this interface. The basic set of tools is located along the left-hand margin. You can see here it's highlighted in green. And we'll dive into these a little bit more as we move throughout the presentation. Hive allows the admin team to control which team members have full access to all of the tools and which team members have a more limited set of standard tools. So a standard user will have access to the tools that you see highlighted in green here, which include search, discover, if you want to kind of, you know, find content by perusing what's there. They can save their searches, they can make requests, and they can check the About tool. This is what standard users have access to. An admin user will have access to all of the tools of a standard user with the addition of libraries, you know, to be able to create new libraries, to add content, to company settings. That would be company-wide, so that you can make it to where settings apply to all of the libraries and all of your admins for those libraries. You can also adjust which tags are in use. So it's not just Wild West where everybody claims or tags it themselves. They can request a tag and you can curate which ones you believe to be acceptable. You may see redundancies and sort of curate that or remove some, or see inadequacies or see requests and add them later. You'll also have the ability there at the bottom to maintain your users and your groups. So the top center portion of this interface includes a search content dialog. And this is very similar to a Google search. For instance, you can enter several words and it will search all of those words in a cumulative fashion. Or you can use parentheses around 2 or more words to narrow the search. The center portion of the Hive interface is allocated to a series of shortcuts. The top portion of the shortcuts is a section called My Saved Searches. A lot of people don't bother saving settings, particularly in Revit, in Hive as well. And I would urge you, there's some real time savings to be had here. A lot of people set them up for print settings. It's that same idea. If you keep searching for the same content, cut out some clicks, just save that search so that you can just click on it again and see that short list of content that you want. So it's also especially useful to have a specific search that provides several alternatives to a recurring issue. You can quickly come back to that saved search to see all of that content related to that search you needed to perform. The second shortcut section is allocated to libraries. All content that's hosted in Hive is added to different libraries. And these libraries could be divided up in any method that's most useful for the firm. So you don't have to divide them up this way. If you're seeing OOTB, that means out of the box. So that's just out of the box Revit content. That's just one facet of our company library, or it's one library in our company database here. So if you're specifically looking for out-of-the-box Revit 2020 content, you could go directly to that library and see everything that's included within it. You could limit your search to it, but here, this would just be for browsing throughout it. You could also have a library specifically for the admin team. That's possible, or specifically for the marketing team. So if you've got different types of documents, not just Revit user types of documents, you can create libraries that help people find that content sort of segmented off from your other Revit families. The final shortcut that you see here is for tags. Tags can be added to any file or content that would help you or assist in searching that content at a later time. So this example shows some materials like fabric, marble, and tile. If you're producing a rendering with these materials, you could open this tag directly and see all the materials that are using this particular tag to automatically narrow your search. Cut down on the number of times you have to recreate materials. The right side of the Hive interface includes a series of filters. Now, these are very powerful. This is probably the most important part to key in on, because if you just do a regular search, man, you're going to turn up a lot of content if you've built this thing out. As you guys have invested in Hive and you've loaded a lot of content, you are going to need the ability to filter out and drill down to exactly what you're wanting and be able to see the trees for the forest, so to speak. So these are going to help you narrow your search quickly to find the group of files that you need in an efficient manner. You can see that it includes libraries and tags as optional filters over there on the right. And if you use the shortcuts previously described, these sections will automatically fill themselves out with those items. You can filter by rating. So yeah, you can rate your content. If that overhead coiling door is an awesome door, I might give it 5 stars. If it's crummy and it breaks as soon as I use it, I could use the rating system to ding it down to 1 star, or I probably should comment on it. I should probably let somebody know, hey, this thing's busted. You need to either fix it or get it out of here. And so you can actually limit your searches so that you don't look at crummy 1 or 2 star content. You're only looking at some of the better options. If you have so much content, you can turn down average content. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into an example here. Oop, skipped a slide. Sorry. We'll start by opening up Hive directly from the Hive icon. So we're not through Revit here. And this is the Hive shortcut directly on my desktop. All right, and so here we've got our interface. It's a standalone program, and it does have a Revit add-in. And as we open up the interface, we see all of the tools over here on the left. You can collapse them, or you can bring them back. You've got that button on the side. On the right side, you also have filters. Those can be collapsed down or expanded back by clicking that filter or funnel icon to get them back. In the center, you have all of the shortcuts to libraries and tags. If I wanted to look at everything that's included in the ATG support documents library, we can simply click on the library shortcut and see this detailed list of the documents in that library. And notice that these are not Revit families. You can tile them or list view. Say, for example, you want to find some information about how our support team is supposed to utilize Zendesk. This is one of the files for ATG support documentation. So you can now include standard practices and workflow documentation for your users. So this is no longer siloed with a single user who needs to distribute that, or it's no longer carved up or sitting in somebody's email that they need to find and forward to you. Documentation can be Word files, it can be PDFs. Any type of document type can be included in a HIVE library because it's a database. And once the document is open, we could print this. We could read the steps that we need. We could keep this up on screen while you follow the procedure. Or if this is just information for someone else, we could download it and email it. But I would say that you should probably just tell them to key in a HIVE search and pull it up for themselves, though. So let's do it a different way. We can go back to the search function, and we can type in Zendesk. And using a star here as a standard Windows tool, we can say that the file could have any other words before it says Zendesk. And we just want to see any document that contains that. The search went right to the file. We'll click our home icon. There we go. And let's take a look at the filters on the right-hand side here. All right, so this is a powerful way to get to exactly the content that you need. Up here, you have all of the libraries, and we started the search by checking ATG support documents so that it's automatically is limiting our search to just that library. You can add some libraries if you want. You can click this button, which selects all the libraries, or you can click the button to do none. You can have HIVE serve up results in order sorted by relevance, name, or several other categories. And here are the tags that you're seeing over here. These are a powerful way for you to create differentiation between families without having to name your file with 15 pieces of abbreviations. And we have the ability to filter this so that we are only going to look at content that's been tagged as support. So even if it's in a different library, then it's going to show up for us. All right, if you know when content was added, then you could also use the added between search or the updated between search. So if you just added some things and you're looking for that, you could fill that out. And at some point, a user and admin decided that these documents needed a support tag. And you can see in the file data, it says tags. So here we have opened this up. And from here, if I finish the search, I can go ahead and clear my previous filters at the end of this. And this has got step-by-step with screen grabs. This is a really cool way if you're putting together your BIM implementation plans. To just take little bits of graphical elements, little screenshots. And if you're telling somebody how to set up a project here, we've got a Revit issue of too many missing elements. To be able to put together a Word document like this, and you're no longer the keeper of that. You can make that public knowledge where all they have to do is search for it easily and grab it within Word here. So you can clear out the filters here and you can send it back home. I like to do that at the end of it so I don't end up searching the same things that I had set up prior to. So whenever I finish it, I like to clear that out. All right, next, let's take a look at HIVE through the lens of a Revit user. Hive offers a Revit add-in. I mentioned earlier that it shows up in a CTC Tools ribbon, and that allows you to access Hive directly from the Revit CTC Tool ribbon. And when accessed in this method, there are a few more options that are available that are specific to the Revit user. At first glance, this may look very similar to the Hive interface that we just reviewed. That's because it is very similar. It has all of the same functionality of a non-Revit user, plus some additional features. Now, you can see a few more filters have been added on the right-hand side here, and these only show up when you launch Hive from within Revit. You have the ability to search Revit content only. You can see that checkbox, which is on by default. And you can filter by Revit category, so door, wall, window, etc. And you can also filter by Revit version as well. Now, that may not seem like a big deal because you know that families can be brought forward. So if you have old content, you could just simply try to load it and it would update it. That functionality still works from within Hive, but you could run into scenarios where someone has created brand new Revit 2020 content, and here I'm stuck on Revit 2019 because they won't, roll it out to the rest of the company. And so I might need to, for a time, limit my searches so that I don't use too new of content. You've got the ability to do that right here within Hive, the Revit launched Hive. Now, let's take a look at the bottom center where we have new Revit category shortcuts that show up. When your database is still small, when you guys are starting off in Hive, you might want to click on a category and browse all of that type. This is a very good way to discover content. Now, obviously, that can get overwhelming once you build up your library, in which case you will need to start filtering and searching better. If you know that you want to find some Revit casework content, you've got the ability to filter that directly from the shortcut. Now, let's take a look at how we can use Hive from within a Revit workflow directly from Revit. All right, here we are in a floor plan, and we're going to start by drawing some exterior walls. We'll just draw a real simple building to help show how Hive could be implemented. And we'll use our rectangle draw tool. If we select this wall, after we placed it here, we can select them and see here in the type, in our type category, that we're just using a generic 8-inch wall made out of everybody's favorite building material, generic. And I'm ready to actually transform these walls to be masonry on studs. Now, if we browse down into the project browser under families, we can confirm that only these two wall types have been loaded here. We've got a couple of ways that we could solve this. I mean, we could use transfer project standards from another project. So we'd go to manage and click on transfer project standards here. But first, you would have to find another project with that specific wall, and then you would have to go through the process of adding it under manage transfer project standards. And yeah, you saw that I didn't have another project open to grab it from. So Revit just shut me down. Another method we could use would be to duplicate existing wall types. And this is what most architects are doing. But this also takes a significant time and effort. So you can give it, if you take an existing one and I've duplicated here, you can rename it to what you need. And then you can go in and modify it here, manually inserting layers. And now I do want to point out that walls are kind of a unique thing because they're not a typical RFA family. They're not something that you load into a project. They're actually a system family. And so really there's only a couple of ways that you could push or pull them from your project. You can't just go out to a place on your server and grab a bunch of such and such wall.rfa files and load them in. And because of that, a lot of firms will preload in way too many walls into their template file so that they don't have to go somewhere else. Other firms are creating a project that has every one of the walls they've ever created inside of it, and you've kind of got to know the way to open that project and navigate to it and copy and paste from within that. But Hive has the ability to actually take these system families that are otherwise not able to be saved out, and it can save them out, and it can make them accessible and to where all you have to do is drag and drop them into a project. All right, so if we go to the CTC software here and we launch the Hive application here, we can do a search inside of a particular library. So we can choose our out of the box Revit content. Actually, I hit the check mark to select all of the libraries. And we can just we'll start by doing a search for walls. And wow, that's not just walls there. That's actually lots of different content. We've got, some wall tags and some other elements. Really anything that had the word wall within it, walls is going to show there. So if we scroll this list, actually precious few of these are walls. You probably have some wall hosted elements. You've got curtain wall mullions are showing up because wall is in curtain wall. So we need ways to be able to refine a search that's sort of casting a very wide net here. So to narrow this down, one of the things that we can look at is to only look at Revit content. We see that that's checked. Over here in our Revit categories, we can get specific with what kind of content we're looking for. Obviously, we'll check walls. And if we apply this, it should really narrow our list down here for us. So if we take another look, every one of these pieces of content is a Revit category of wall. And if we want to be more specific, we can change our search to exterior wall. And now it's looking for that word, both in the name of it and in the metadata. And we find this brick on metal stud. Look, I can just drag and drop it into the view, and you watch it appear over here in our project browser, kind of confirming that it has added that content. Now I've closed Hive, but you could leave that running. And you can select every one of these walls here, and in the type selector in one move, I can change them over to that new wall type that I loaded. So I don't have to stop what I'm doing and try to meticulously foresee all of the families I might need to load. I can go ahead and use generic content, justify it. If it's important that I align those walls to the outside face, knowing that later I'm actually going to specify what they become and load in that content from Hive. So we can see those exterior walls are completed here and just save the project. Next up, we're going to take a look at some interior walls. So we're going to go back to the same wall command, and we will select generic 8-inch wall here. And we're going to draw a small lengthwise and some transverse walls here. And I'll copy some walls down the way here. I've got my multiple and constrain on. Then I can utilize the dimension tool to equally space these things. I do need to tie it on the outside here to the structural grid, and that's going to allow me to equal space them. And get rid of that now. And then for the longitudinal walls here, I can just offset these 3 feet on each side, get rid of that middle one. And I've got, basically a 6-foot corridor to work from there. So next up, I'm using split elements to split each of these single walls into 2. And then I'll just end up doing trim, extend, multiple to trim these walls back from the corridor. And we'll do the same thing on the bottom side. All right. Next up, we'll delete this inner segment here just to be able to create a vestibule as we do this. Offset a wall. Getting real creative here. All right, so we've got a vestibule in place here. So we're going to take a look at the wall types that we have. We don't have any interior. We're going to leverage Hive to bring in more content. So we'll click over here, launch Hive. And we could have just left Hive running on the side. I probably should have. And as standard practice, you would just kind of leave it going off maybe on another screen now that everybody's got multiple monitors. But you can see that it saved the previous search, and all of those filters are still applied on the right side. So I'll just change it to an interior wall search. And it's not a perfect search. I mean, you can see that somehow some exterior walls even made it through because we didn't filter them out. And I'm going to look for a 4 7/8 inch partition. Yeah, And then we can just drag that in. And just like that, we can see that our wall gets added to the project. And so I can grab all of these walls here and change them over. Oh, missed one. There we go. And then we're off and running. I mean, we've got all of the wall content that we needed. I didn't have to jump through the hoops of transfer project standards or have to spend 3 minutes creating a duplicate wall type. I know I've done that over and over before. It's a worse use of my time to duplicate a metal stud wall and make a wood stud wall of the same kind and burn a few minutes jumping through those hoops when it should have long been created long ago, but nobody's adding it to the template file. So I guess I'll just recreate it again. All right. Next up, let's work on doors here next. Let's say that we wanted to add some doors. It's going to be kind of the same process. If you don't have any doors in a project, that's pretty rare, but you'll see that warning. And let's go ahead and load them through HIVE. So come down here. All right, and here's our search here. And we'll do a search for double door. And the search does return several double doors. We also have double door cabinets and double sash and double hung windows. Some of these just simply have door in the name. So we're going to need to narrow our search here. And we're going to, yeah, take a look at that. It just happens to say door there. This one, fire alarm door. Wow. So sometimes I marvel at how content still ends up in the search here, which is why you need to focus on using these filters here. We're going to start by, and I just hit the check mark here for the current. If you hit the check mark, it's your current Revit version. So in this case, 2019. And then we're also going to need to filter our category here. And we're going to choose doors. Bum, bum, bum. There we go. And we'll go ahead and apply these filters here. Right on. So we can also add exterior to the search, and we'll just use this. Let's see, which one of these do I want to use? The double light door here, and you can see that it pops up our type selector catalog or a type catalog. So you probably noticed this before, particularly with out of the box Revit content. If there are lots of different types that are preset for, in this case, a door size, they'll have a type catalog that someone authored. Those show up through HIVE as well. In fact, if you look, you can see an icon with a T on it that shows that it has a type catalog, but that's going to load just the same, whether it's a single family or a single type or has a catalog. So we can just select the 84-inch tall doors here. And when we're ready, we can load those in. There we go. All right, great. Now I've just got no tag, but it did load the doors in for me here. So those 84-inch doors you can see over here, and I can leave HIVE open if I need to do another search for a single door. And there's also the ability to take a look at a detail pane. I'll click on this. Might need to give it a minute. It's got to read content from that Revit family, but it'll pull open a preview pane to serve me up some more information so I can make a decision about this door. All right, so here's my preview pane. And so it pulls up this sidebar here for more detail. It has the path, it has file size, all of the family types are listed there as well. And the detail pane is available for each of your files to help you get the exact information about files that you might want as well as simply just loading them in. So you can go to a grid view or a list view. All right, and so with this this double light, let's go ahead and load in the 84s. and we'll load them in. So over in our project browser, those types are going to be loaded in. And we can go ahead and let's see, grab a more interior door. If you wanted to, you can drag doors directly from the project browser in the workspace too. I don't normally do it that way, but you know, once it shows up in the project browser on the left side here, some of you guys may run into this with generic annotations, but you can select the door that you want and you can actually drag it from the project browser over to the side. I normally just start the door command, but we can place in these double doors that we just loaded for our entry and our vestibule. And then we can change over, go to our single doors here, place one on each end here for our exits. Change it one more time. We'll insert our typical interior doors here. Place this guy. Now, normally I nudge, but you can select a temporary dimension. You can change this, move it a little bit closer still. And from here, I'll just want to copy that door around to the other room. So I'll make sure I set the options for multiple and constrain, and we'll go wall to wall. All right, I'm seeing out of the corner of my eye here while I'm drawing this, I'm getting some good questions about the type catalog. Appreciate you, Sean, chiming in for me here. Got my hands full putting in some some doors here. So I can align these doors. I can just copy this one down, and now I can keep using that same wall edge. And after I do this side, I can just mirror this across. Boom. Same thing for the other side. All right, we'll save. And now we're going to be ready to tag these doors as well. So in this, when I'm ready to tag, if I go to the annotate and choose tag by category, it's possible, you've probably all seen this, that if you click to tag something and that tag doesn't exist, it pops up and tells you there is not a tag loaded for that. A lot of people are going to keep their standard tags loaded into their project template. And so, you know, I would advise that. You can also load them into Hive, or you can have alternate tags loaded into Hive that you only use sometimes. It may not be every time that you get to use specialty equipment tags, or maybe you've got a, I don't know, fancy client who wants their art tagged so that you can keep up with that. But if you want to leverage Hive to keep track of tags as well, we can just launch Hive, and we can do a search on here, and you know, look for the appropriate company standard door tag in this case. And it produced a lot of results because it's looking for tags and it's looking for things that say door. Make a change. I'll erase that. I'll put in door tag with parentheses. Now this time, I'm sorry, with quotation marks. So it's actually going to limit my list to these ones that actually do say door tag. And so that list got limited really well for me. I just double click it and it adds that annotation to my project. All right, click the home, clear it out. And to be able to tag these, you just click on annotate. The fastest way to do this is do tag all. If I take a look here, door tags, you can see that the door tag was already loaded. Awesome. So now we're pouring gas on the fire here. However, it has sort of randomly chosen how it's going to number. In fact, it used the 200s here on floor one, and it sort of put an incorrect tag on each of these. But I'm going to, and this isn't about BIM Project Suite, but there is a free tool, the renumbering tool. It's real quick to utilize here, and it's free. So you just fire that up, choose the doors tab, and then tell it that we want to start with 101. Make sure you check to have it auto swap, click renumber, and now I can just click these in the order that I want them renumbered. And if that number exists, it grabs it from the wrongly numbered door and commandeers it for the correct door. It'll swap it out. And you can see that the tool is still active in the background, so it knows to swap between them. And man, this is the way to renumber. We've loaded doors that didn't exist and placed them pretty painlessly. We loaded tags that didn't exist and tagged all of them at once. And then we were able to renumber that kind of all at once. It's kind of a very fast workflow here. Next on, we're going to move on to door scheduling and how Hive can help us with that. Now, with a typical door schedule, your firm typically is going to have all of their schedules loaded into a template, and that's usually going to be best practice to do that, but you need to be aware that it actually limits people's creativity. You know, when I'm doing advanced Revit training, we're talking about what kind of schedules should they create. Most architects say, well, I only need to make a door schedule, a window schedule, and a finish schedule, and that's it. And I sort of challenge them to start developing schedules that help bring more value to their client. You know, if you can tell them not just square footage, but you can get down in it. You can tell them departmental level what kind of area they're looking at on the fly. You can give them rough costs on elements because Revit can track all of that if you've taken a few minutes to write a schedule for it. But the problem is people don't want to load in too many schedules into their template because they don't want to confuse people. They don't want them using alternate schedules that are still under development. But you can load this kind of stuff in Hive, and that way you can make it to where not all of these schedules are loaded. You can make them on an as needed basis that they can go out and grab a highly applicable schedule and load it into their project directly here. So if we take a look at this particular project, we got 0 schedules over here right now. So we've got the ability to leverage more schedules. If we do a search for a door schedule over here, we have already, different users have created these schedules, and I can sort of, make an assumption based on the usage of this or the naming of it or metadata, just double click on it and it adds it into the project. And one of the cool things about Revit is that schedule being a quantity reporting schedule, it's not pre-filled out, but you can see that it has filled itself out. So when I load that schedule in, it brings over all of the formatting and it brings over the columns I want reported, but it uses my project to fill in the data automatically. So I just drag the schedule in and boom, it has filled itself out. I'll go ahead and close that. All right. Save that. All right. So the next thing I want to take a look at is how do we handle requesting inside of Hive? I'm going to take a glance over here at my chat. I was planning on kind of fielding some questions here at the end, but I am kind of coming up to it here. So let me just kind of hurry through this and kind of let you know that you've got the ability to perform searches for things inside of Hive. We've taken a look at that. You've got the ability to filter them too, but if you don't see what you're wanting, you do have the ability to place a request. And so if I were looking for non-Revit material, if I'm looking for some AIA documents over here, oops, we've got the only Revit content checked, but I can uncheck that, reapply it, find some documents here. And if I open these up to take a look at them, they're not the AIA documents that I'm looking for here. And so if I need to place a request for that, we've got the ability to do that over here on the left-hand side. So we can select requests and we can choose, my current request is what's open here, but I can hit this plus to place a request, tell them which library or libraries that the content should go in. I've need to fill out a subject because they're going to see that as my request, and I can request some AIA documents that I want to add. All right, you can fill out details if you want to put in blah blah blah. And they can tell that this is a serious request by my detailed description here, but you can indicate the priority of your request. Naturally, everybody's on high priority, but if you cry wolf too often, they will know that it's not really that high. So we'll choose an Arch tag. I think it ought to be tagged with Arch. And then I'm not going to click send request, but if I did, it would actually fire off an email to the administrator of these libraries to make that request. Now, if I've got the content, I also have the ability to attach it to the request and say, hey, I've got this content. I'm just going to fill this out, but I've got this content. I can browse to it and upload it for the library admins to consider adding that content. This is the best way to start adding in, particularly Revit families. As I fill this out here, uh, if you've got content that you went ahead and created and you think it belongs as part of the library, then you can attach it and say, hey, with your approval, go ahead and add this. Choose a tag. It needs to get the arch tag. That's good. Sorry, it's hard to do and talk. So we can just click on add. So now we're going to attach these files. If I browse up here off my desktop, here, I got to find them. So underneath this folder are these documents that I've already got, and I can choose to attach them like this. And then we can send this request. I'm not going to click that because it actually would send an email off to people, but that's how you add a request. You can also manage requests over here on this tab. You can see all of the ones that are open, in progress, if they're completed. If I'm an admin, I've got the ability to change those statuses to reject them because I've got a better way of tagging things, or I don't think that content belongs in that particular library, or we just don't need to add it as part of the Hive thing. I've got the ability to control that. So we can close this out. We're pretty close to the end here. I just, we don't have time to walk you through the administrative side of this. So I just want to mention a few points here, and we'll kind of wrap up with questions after this. But thus far, all the tools that we looked at were for all users. And I want to briefly mention that you've got the ability to invite users to your libraries and set their access as consumers, contributors, library admins, or you might be a company admin. And you have the ability to create new libraries and have Hive harvest entire folders of content, or you could carefully bring in content a file at a time. And when you create new libraries, you'll want to add groups of users rather than just individual users. It's a lot less maintenance if you can sort of group together different types of users and then just simply add that group as having access to that library, just like Windows permissions has group permissions. And as you add content to libraries, you can create new tags, or you can select already predefined tags to be automatically tagged to incoming content that you select to process or batch process. And also, admins have the ability to set company settings that include where content is cached, and setting company-wide settings across all the libraries that control, whether users can add content or rate content or submit requests. Most people are going to leave that open because they want that feedback, but you may have some people that abuse things, or it just may not be a good process, or I don't know, you may be a controlling individual. No judgments here, but you've got the ability to revoke or set access to different features within the Hive software. So just in conclusion, just to wrap up here, and then we'll do some questions if you guys have it, and I'll take a look at the chat. Hive allows searching all content independent of folders. So I don't have to come up with a really smart naming convention for the folders and then explain that to the whole team and then still not be able to find content based on whether it's an interior or exterior door or whatever. Hive searches the specific attributes within the content. That's that metadata we were talking about. And it allows you to include custom tags and categories. Content can be hosted in the cloud. That's a differentiator for Hive. You've got access to this, even if you're remote or off-site, you don't have to VPN in to be able to access this content, or you could make it exclusive to your local network. Users experience instant consumption of files. You just drag and drop that thing in. I mean, it is amazing. And it allows design software specific consumption. If I'm using Revit, I can limit my content searches to just Revit files. This concludes the webinar, Hive Consulting Content Management Issues, Solving Content Management Issues. And as you can see, this is an extremely powerful search engine for firm-specific files and content. It streamlines the workflow for all users into a single, simplified content management solution. So it's not just a place to get files. I mean, you're placing requests and retagging it. It's a one-stop shop for where you should go. If anyone is interested in learning more about Hive, we'd welcome the opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with you. You can contact me or any of our sales consultants. Sean's on the line. So if you've got a great question, he is absolutely someone that can step in and help too. And at this time, I'm going to take a look in the chat for questions, and hope that this was valuable to you guys in learning some of Hive's capabilities here. So give me a second. I'm going to start scanning through our comments here and see if there's something I can help with. I'm pretty sure Sean's been on top of this too. All right, some questions about type catalog. Awesome. I appreciate it, Sean. Man, you've been all over this. He's my wingman for this one here. All right, so we've got a model group. Bumped over to undefined. Mm-hmm. Also define the pipe system, retain pipe associations. See, I didn't know that. Appreciate it, Sean. You have handled them all, man. I appreciate it, Sean. Well, if you guys do have any other questions, I'm going to leave it open for a few more seconds. If I don't get you an answer, we've got a log of these of the questions. So if we need to follow up, we can email that to you. Also, when this concludes, you guys are going to receive an email that does have a link to where this is going. It's not posted yet. Obviously, I'm still talking, but once it is posted, then you guys will receive a link to be able to revisit this content later if you need to consider Hive and kind of see how it's consumed and kind of make that value decision for it then. So hope you guys have enjoyed your time. Hope you've learned something. There's a lot of time to be saved in this particular area. So much better than just saving a couple of clicks, inside of a command. This is saving people so much frustration and time to be able to do the work that's necessary to put all of the libraries that they need right in their hands, and also have a great control over your standards and making sure they're not using broken stuff and jamming up your projects and causing corruption. So this solves a whole lot of issues. It's not just an efficiency play. So thanks for your time, and you can reach out to me if you need to. I'm Jay Hughes at ATG USA. I'm AEC industry specialist. I'm an architect. I apologize if you're not, and I've been skewing this too much towards the architect's use of this, but it's true for any designer, whether you're using Revit or not. So thanks for your time, and we look forward to seeing you guys again soon.